Is the government trying to expand who can lose their citizenship in the United States? There's a new bill that just dropped, and honestly, it's causing quite a stir. Welcome back to Dream Visa Updates. I'm John, and today we need to talk about something serious. So here's what's happening. Congress just introduced a bill called the Fraud Accountability Act in both the Senate and the House. This bill could completely change how denaturalization works in America. And before we dive deep into this, I need you to understand something crucial. If you're watching this and you're already feeling anxious, take a breath. We're going to break down exactly what this bill does, who it affects, and most importantly, what it actually means for you. Now, I've covered denaturalization in previous videos, so I won't rehash all those details today. This video is purely an update because so many of you have been asking me about this bill. You deserve clear, fact-based information without the panic. Let me get straight to the point. This bill came about as a response to a recent daycare fraud scandal. While it talks about punishing fraud in general, the bulk of it focuses on immigration consequences for people who commit fraud. And here's the massive change that has everyone talking. Under this bill, a naturalized U.S. citizen could be denaturalized for fraud committed after they became a citizen. Let that sink in for a second. Right now, denaturalization only happens if someone lied during the naturalization process itself, or if there was some technical error that means they shouldn't have been granted citizenship in the first place. Once you're a citizen, you can be punished through the criminal justice system for crimes you commit, but you can't lose your citizenship for those crimes. This bill flips that completely upside down. It would allow, and in many cases mandate, denaturalization of citizens who commit fraud after becoming citizens. That's a fundamental shift in how citizenship works. So how exactly does the bill achieve this? It removes the civil court process from denaturalization entirely. Instead, the same criminal court that convicts someone of fraud would immediately move to denaturalize them. Once you're convicted of fraud in criminal court, boom, within that same process, you'd also lose your citizenship. No separate civil proceeding, no additional court case. It all happens together. And here's where it gets even more intense. The bill uses very specific language. It says the judge shall denaturalize someone, not may, not can consider, shall. That means it's mandatory, no discretion, no leniency. If you're convicted of fraud, the judge must denaturalize you. But wait, there's more. The bill also lowers the threshold for what counts as fraud. Currently, for fraud to be considered an aggravated felony that leads to deportation for a permanent resident, it generally has to involve $10,000 or more. This bill removes that threshold completely. Any fraud, no matter the amount, would qualify. Think about what that means. For permanent residents, any fraud conviction could lead to deportation, not just major fraud involving significant money, any fraud. And for naturalized citizens, any fraud conviction means mandatory denaturalization. The bill does this by changing definitions in Section 237A2 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. This section deals with deportability and deportable offenses. Here's what's fascinating from a legal perspective. These deportability concepts normally apply only to non-citizens, permanent residents, people on visas, people without status. But by changing these definitions and applying them to naturalized citizens, the bill is suddenly using deportability rules on U.S. citizens. That's never been done before. It's not how our laws work. Citizens can't be deported, non-citizens can be deported. Those are two completely separate categories. And if that wasn't enough, the bill applies retroactively all the way back to September 30th, 1996. Almost 30 years. So if anyone was convicted of fraud under this lower threshold any time since September 1996, this bill could apply to them. Permanent residents could be deported. Naturalized citizens could be denaturalized. Now, before you spiral, let me remind you of something really important. Bills get introduced in Congress all the time. Just because a bill is introduced doesn't mean it will ever become law. These bills in the House and Senate appear to be reactive responses to that fraud scandal I mentioned. Politicians want to show their constituents they're taking action, they're tough on fraud, they're protecting people. That's what leads to bills like this getting introduced. But introduction is a very long way from becoming law. This bill is currently in committee for discussion. It's extremely far from actually becoming law, and even if it somehow passed, it's not law today. Let's talk about the legal problems with this bill because there are several major ones. First, there's a Supreme Court case called Afroyim versus Rusk. This case held that a U.S. citizen's citizenship cannot be taken away by Congress unless they voluntarily renounce it themselves. This bill is trying to do exactly what that case prohibits. It's creating a mechanism to strip citizenship in certain situations. There would absolutely be legal challenges based on Afroyim versus Rusk. Second major problem. This bill creates two classes of U.S. citizens. You have natural-born citizens whose citizenship can never be taken away no matter what fraud they commit, even if it's millions of dollars. And then you have naturalized citizens whose citizenship can be stripped if they commit fraud. It creates this conditional citizen class that sits somewhere between permanent residence and full citizenship. The issue? This violates equal protection principles. There's another Supreme Court case, Schneider versus Rusk from 1964, that's over 60 years of precedent. That case held that naturalized citizens possess the same rights as natural-born citizens, except for one thing, the ability to become president. Besides that exception, all citizens have the same rights. By creating this conditional citizen class where one group can be denaturalized for post-citizenship fraud and another group can never be denaturalized, the bill directly contradicts that precedent. The government can't create two classes of citizens and treat them differently. I honestly don't see how this bill survives legal challenges based on that alone. To be completely honest with you, I'm not convinced this bill will ever become law. There are too many issues with it. The definition of fraud is incredibly broad. What if someone does something relatively minor and gets convicted of fraud? The consequences would be devastating. Here's what does concern me, though. More and more, our government is treating denaturalization like deportation. These are completely separate concepts. Non-citizens can be deported if they commit certain offenses. Citizens cannot be deported for offenses they commit. All these bills and discussions about denaturalization are essentially turning it into a form of punishment, which is supposed to be reserved for the criminal justice system, not the immigration system. If a naturalized citizen commits a crime, they're punished for that crime through the criminal justice system just like any other citizen. It worries me that there's this growing conversation about using the immigration system as punishment for naturalized citizens. But again, I don't believe this bill will become law. And even if it somehow does, those two critical Supreme Court precedents I mentioned, Afroyim versus Rusk and Schneider versus Rusk, don't allow this bill to do what it's trying to do. Bottom line, stay informed, but don't panic. This is a bill in committee, not a law. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you subscribe to Dream Visa Updates and hit that like button so you get updates whenever important immigration news drops. Drop your questions in the comments below, and I'll do my best to cover them in future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.